Hello, thank you for joining us for today's video on the item analysis report for 2023. In today's video, we are going to be looking at how to use or what information you can find in your item analysis document. Let's start on the home page or the imports tab. On this page, you will enter links for your previous item analysis. So if you created an item analysis in 2022, you will go ahead and put your link in the green box, and that will import past data. In the red box, that is where you'll put your spring 2023 workbook page link. And on that one, that is where we're going to pull the information out of the CRS. And that workbook is going to do a little bit of math on the background, and it's going to give us the information that we're looking for in a similar form to previous item analysis years. And it'll look a little bit different than what we see in the CRS. The third one down is benchmark data. So for 2023, 2024, if your district decides to administer one of Cambium's benchmark assessments, those are the full length assessments that will have two parts and that you can grade it just like the OST. It'll assign performance levels like advanced, accelerate, or accomplished, proficient, and so on. If you give that assessment, you can create a workbook, and there's directions in the direction sheet for the item analysis that will allow you to create a workbook for that, and then we can import that benchmark data right there so that you can see that in your trends over time data or on the analysis tab. And then the last one is a comparison link. So right now I have a link that will compile the Stark County ESC average for each of our tests and each of the questions. Currently, there's no information in there, but I'm hoping that throughout the end of this month and next month, that we'll have collected all of our schools or most of our schools, and then we can go ahead and put that data into that spreadsheet, and you'll have a comparison point to compare how your building or district did to how the county average was there. If that is blank, you will actually be able to include another item analysis. So maybe you're in a district that has 2 elementary schools or 2 middle schools. If you put in the other schools item analysis URL there, then what will happen is on the compare or on the analysis tab, you'll be able to see how they did on the 2023 test and compare the 2 schools. And that might create some good conversations. You can work together to build each other up and make each other better on those things. So that's just an opportunity that is there. Again, currently for our ESC districts, they will see a link there that will eventually populate and have the county average. At the bottom of the page here, you're going to notice that each tested area has 3 tabs. The first one is just your spring 2023 item analysis data. That's the only thing that's in there. And that's always a great starting spot. So we'll come back and that's where we'll start. The tab that says BM, that is where the benchmark data will show up, and it'll be very similar to the S2023 once that data is imported. And then the final one is the analysis tab. And that's where we can really see our trends over time. So we can see how often questions have been asked. We can see, how our students did each year. And then there's a nice little graph that will help you to visualize that a little better. So let's jump into our 2023 data. And for our example, I'm going to select 7th grade math. And 7th grade math, I just put together some fake data here so that you could see or have an idea of what this will look like. So if you notice that, I did really well on a question here, this is just made up information. This is not accurate. So please don't use this as a comparison to how your district did. At the top, you'll see a key, and that key is going to tell us how we color coded the left-hand column here. So column A, you're going to notice all these pretty colors, and that's based on the percentage of students that scored 0 on that question. So we can see this first question is a bright green, and that means that we did pretty well on that question. We can see that only 10% of our students scored 0, and that's why it is green. If you're on a question, your students, more than 50% of them got a 0, you'll notice that that is red. So when I look at question 18 here, we can see that 52% of our students got a 0 on that. So it will automatically highlight that question as a red. So that's something that we may want to look at, or we may want to know a little bit more about because that's an area where we struggled. Next, you'll see the breakdown. We kind of already mentioned this. What percent scored at each point value? When we look at ELA, you're going to notice that there's going to be up to 10 points because that writing assessment or that writing prompt, that is a 10-point question. So there'll be a few more columns there for ELA than there are for the other subjects that you're looking at. As you're looking through this data, one thing that I want to bring to your attention, so this first column is will tell you the number, it'll tell you the standard, but one thing not to overlook is how many points that question was worth. So these questions are only worth 1 point that we're seeing here as I scroll down through. So it's okay that we have zeros in the 2, 3, and 4 points earned because these questions are only worth 1 point. You will notice in math that sometimes you'll get a 2-point, you could possibly get a 3-point question for some of the areas. If that happens, again, pay attention to, moving over into that 2-point and 3-point column. In the next column over, you'll see previously released items. And for this, you're going to notice that some of these cells are yellow and some are white. And for that, what we're actually seeing there are the yellow cells, the ones that I've highlighted yellow. That's telling you that that question was a released question. So you can click on that link, it will pull up a Google Doc, and in that Google Doc, you will be able to see the exact question. If you're looking at a white one, you can click on that link, you can pull up the doc, and you won't be able to see that exact question, but you'll be able to see every question that's been released since 2016 that is in that standard. So it'll give you an idea of how they've asked other questions, but you won't actually be able to see that question. So let's jump in and take a look at this first one. So for that, as I pull it up here, we'll see that this is 7G3, and we can see the standard there. And then right here in the middle, you're going to have, and this is only for 6th and 7th grade math, it's going to tell you what the calculator status, I should say, for this question is. So you'll notice that if we scroll down this page, we have a bunch of questions and they all say calculator neutral. So that means that when this question was created, it was created that it could go on the calculator portion of the test or the no calculator portion of the test. So for that reason, you will see calculator neutral. Now, if it just says calculator there, that means that that question was on the calculator section, and it was designed that students would need to use their calculator for that question. If it says no calculator, that was on the no calculator section because that test question was designed that you would not be able to use a calculator on it. These calculator neutral ones could really go on either test, and I really can't tell you which test that it was on. We just know that when it was designed, it could be on either one. Over here, we'll see what question it was. So we can see question 6, and this came from 2023. So I know that this was this past year's test as far as that goes. As I scroll down, you'll see that there's another question that was from the 2023 test, as well as then we jump into 22, 21, and we'll go all the way back to 2016 sometimes with released questions that I can take a look at. So this is a great spot to look as you're looking at questions, how your students did. This is a really easy way to jump over and see the question or to see similar questions. Let's jump back to the item analysis page now. And in the next column over, we're going to see a DOK level. And for DOK level, you're going to notice that it only appears when the previously released item is highlighted yellow. We only know the DOK level if they've released that question. So for that, it's kind of interesting to know or to see. Again, it's not always available, but when it is, I do like to look at that and see, okay, here's a DOK level 3, and our students did in the middle range there. So that's something to look at, and it's something to pay attention to as you're looking through your data. The next 3 columns were just things that we put in at the beginning, and you can change these. They don't have to stay this. If you want to name them something else, you most certainly can. It will not mess up the rest of the spreadsheet. If you want to add some columns to the right here, that is okay as well. But this is just so that you can use this to help you reflect on what you're doing in your classroom or in your TBTs, things like that, that might help you to improve your instruction for the upcoming year. The last thing that you'll see on this page is there's a link up here that should take you to the released test questions all grouped together. So this is where we actually get them to put on the Google Doc. If I click on this, let me show you. So this is what the release looks like from the state. In the Ohio Assessment Portal under Resources, you can also find this here, and it will walk you through all of the questions. The one thing that I really like is it gives you a rationale of why someone might choose each of the questions, what the correct answer is, things like that. So, and then it gives you examples of 1-point responses, as well as on somewhere there's multiple points, it will show you, okay, this is something that you might get 0 points for going forward. So here we can see that there's 2 examples of a 0-point response that they might have for that answer. So that's really nice to kind of look at as you're diving into English language arts. You'll be able to see exemplar responses. So they'll show you what a 10-point response looks like, and then work your way down all the way to a 0 or a 1-point response. I think it's actually a 2-point response. They'll show you what that would look like. So let's jump back to the item analysis. And we will then take a look at the next tab. So this is the benchmark. Again, it doesn't have any information in there right now, but if you were to paste a link in there, you would be able to see it would break it down very similar to how that 2023 one was. It's not going to have DOK levels. I just did not put those in. And as far as the links, you would have those from the others. So I don't have those listed because those weren't released there. Okay, so now let's jump over to the analysis tab. So for the analysis tab, this is going to be 7th grade. So we can see that off to the side here, here's our subcategories. So we have ratios and proportions as our first one, and then we can see a couple of the standards that are that we begin with. So we start with RP1, RP2, and you can kind of a little bit see RP3 here below. Now I'm going to hide a few rows just for a second to make this easier for us to look at. And what is happening here is we can see 2017 through the benchmark item, and this is just the item. So looking at each test, we can see how many questions were asked in that standard, and we can see what questions those were. So focusing in on 2017, I can tell that RP1, question 27 and 39 were released. So there were 2 questions released. And if I jump all the way up to 2022, you can see that there are 3 questions released. And on that, there were 29, 36, and 52. This past year, there were 2, and question 3 and 47 were the questions that were actually there. Now, as far as release questions go, those you'll see highlighted in different colors on the 7th grade test. You'll also see them highlighted in different colors on the 6th grade test. And these are telling you whether you are allowed to use your calculator or not. So when the question was designed, you can see over here, these green ones, that meant that was on the, yes, it's okay to use my calculator on this section of the test. The yellow ones, calculator neutral, so those could have been on either part of the test. And then the red one is telling you that was on the no calculator part of the test. So the students weren't able to use a calculator there. You will notice the benchmark item there. I did not highlight any of these. These are all released questions, but so like number 3 could be number 27. So it was getting kind of messy with me trying to do that. So for that, I did not highlight any of these, but all the benchmark items have been released or are released questions. I think that's it for this first section. So again, this is how many items were released, how many items were on each test. I keep saying released. It's how many items were on each test, and then what numbers they were, and then again, the colored ones are the release. What you'll notice is if you go back to like 3rd grade math, they'll all be highlighted red because you're not able to use your calculator there. If you were to jump up to like algebra or geometry, those will all be highlighted green because you will be able to use your calculator on both parts of the test there. And then I believe in other subject areas, I just kept them yellow, which is the color they were in previous years. So hopefully that helps you as you're looking at the questions to have a better idea of knowing if, at least for the ones that are released, if they were allowed to use their calculator or not on it. Okay, so let's jump to the next several columns. And, oops. I'll keep 2017 there just so that we can see that. And one of the things that as you're doing this, feel free to hide any of the columns. So like if you don't have any data in 18 and 19, you can hide those, or 17. If you're not planning on doing the benchmark, you can hide that column. And then if there is some old data that you really don't want to see graphed, if you hide the columns, then that data will not appear on your graph. So you're not actually deleting it out. It just won't appear on your graph there. So that's what I would really recommend doing here. So here's the item column. So I left that. And then right next to it, this is our percent of students that scored 0 on that question. So for question 27, we can see that 50% of our students scored a 0 on that. And for question 39, 34% of our students scored a 0 on that. So as we're looking at these percent 0 points, we want these numbers to be as small as possible because, you know, that's our percent of students that are getting 0. So hopefully that as each year, the number of students getting 0 on a standard or a question continues to decrease or decline there. So that's a pretty easy one to understand. So I'm going to go ahead and hide those columns. And then I'll bring over the average. So what we're going to see here for 2017, we can see that I took the two questions that we had scores for on 2017. I'm averaging them together to get one score, which we can see if I average 50 and 34 together, I get 42. And then that allows me to graph these. Now I'm going to back up for 1 second because I forgot to mention, all right, this is the compare 2023 column. So if you keep that Stark County average that we talked about on the first page, that link in there, what will happen is as soon as I compile that, we'll see some numbers pop in here. So a really nice thing is I could compare, okay, this is how my students did on the 2023 test. And this is how the county did on the 2023 test. And I can compare those two things right next to each other. So that is something that will be coming. It will populate as well. Or if you were to put another school or another building's item analysis URL in that blue box on that first page, then you'll be able to see that, hey, these are my two schools. So this is elementary 1, this would be elementary 2, and you can compare those two values to each other. So let's go ahead and then hide those. And so, yeah, here's the average, and that just basically gives us one number that's going to make it easier for us to graph. Here's the compare again. Here's my benchmark. If you were to fill in those, or if they had data, those values would show up. Currently, we don't have any information in there, so that is why they're not showing up. Let's jump over then finally to, if I scroll further to the right, it will graph the averages for me. So again, I made up this data. So this is really something that I'm looking for, or that I want to see when I look at my data. So we can see that in this standard every year, we're kind of declining a little bit. So our percentage of students that are getting 0 just keeps going down, and that's really awesome. So we're improving on that standard every year. Now, there's some years where it starts to go up, and there's lots of things that could come into that. You know, we could have had a pandemic. We could have a question where, you know, one year they asked all DOK level 1 questions there, and then this year, you know, it's a DOK 3, so it's a more challenging. It's going to take a greater amount of knowledge or effort to solve that problem. So that. One thing that I really want to stress is, as you're looking at this, sometimes you're going to come across a standard and you're going to notice, wow, my bars are all really high here. That's something that I really want to take a look at. And why are we struggling in RP3? Like every year I'm over that 50% for the average. So you can see I'm up in the 80s. My lowest that I got to was 68. So this might be a standard that I want to really look at. Maybe I want to ask some other people, like, hey, you know, if I'm going to lead teacher meetings, hey, are you guys having trouble with this standard? So that I can get a better understanding of, you know, is there something I'm missing? What can I do to help my students perform better on this standard? Okay. So again, this first example, great, because it's declining. Sometimes you're going to have ones where all the bars are just really low, or maybe you're missing because they didn't ask a question that year in that standard. So as you're doing that, celebrate these ones where it's decreasing, or that, you know, you had 2 years where it was high and then you drop down for the next 2 years, or you've improved the next 2 years. So really celebrate those as you're looking at that graph. That's important to do, okay, as you're looking at that data. So the next thing that I wanted to do, that's pretty much the trends over time. So you can kind of scroll through, you can look. We did put the link here so that as you're looking at, maybe I'm looking at RP3 and I'm going, man, I struggle every year on this one. You can click here and then you can go in and you can look at all the questions that have been released in that standard. Again, it's not all of them, so it's just the released ones, but maybe it'll trigger something that maybe you think your kids might be having problems on, things like that. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to jump to third grade reading. And reading, if you remember, last year we did not have data for reading, so they did not break it down. They did not break it down. They did release some questions, but we did not get this reporting from last year because they were still field testing some questions and things like that. So with that, very similar breakdown to math that we just looked at. But what we will notice is that right here, we have those 10 columns. So we're going all the way out to 10. So as you're looking at that, really pay attention to how many questions or how many points that question is worth. If I scroll all the way to the bottom and look at writing, I really want to bring your attention to this part. As I'm looking at this, please do not pay attention to the coloring on the writing part. It's going to be inflated as you're looking at that because we're looking at the percent that scored 0. So the only way to score 0 on the writing prompt is you'll get one of those error codes. So if it says that you did not have enough data, or you did not have enough original text, or it was unreadable, things like that. Those are all ways that you can score 0 points here. If you're the lowest possible, I shouldn't say the low, really look at 0, 1, and 2, because the lowest rating on the rubric is a 2. Because on 2 of the sections, there is a score of, you can get a 1 to 4. So unless you're getting one of those error codes, you're probably not going to get a 0, or you won't get a 0 unless you have one of those error codes. I don't believe that it's possible to get a 1. But you could also get a 2 and it could be your lowest score there. So again, ignore the coloring here. We're looking at in this situation that 29% of the students got the lowest score on the rubric for that. So just be careful, pay really close attention to the numbers, like where are we at? Are we getting kids in our, the 8, 9, 10, 7, 8, 9, 10 up in there? What can we do to improve that? The last thing that I wanted to say before I jump off here is as you're looking at this is great to be able to see those released items and to match them up as you're looking at that data, and hopefully that'll give you an insight of what's going on the test. But a new feature that's available through Cambium is the test authoring system. And what it will allow you to do is it will allow you to create tests out of the released questions. So it's a little bit more control than what we've had in the past with the checkpoint assessments. So you may want to look at using those assessments. Checkpoint assessments are still good, as well as the benchmark assessment, and allowing your students to practice the actual questions so that they'll see, the making multiple selections and things like that, the drag and drops and questions. They'll be able to get the experience of doing the question exactly as it is in the testing system there. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that. Really hope that this was helpful to you and that your item analysis helps you to analyze your data a little bit better. Hope to talk to you real soon and hope you guys have a great school year.